Hi, this is Francis Sadeko with TIRIAS Research. I'm here speaking with Jim McGregor. He's actually in Nuremberg right now because he's there for Embedded World, which stay tuned for that video. But today we will be talking about the show that just finished, which is Mobile World Congress from Barcelona. So Jim, glad to see that you're looking good and refreshed. Hopefully, the weekend has been good to energize you from that trade show before you get into embedded world.
If I can manage just navigating the trades in Germany, I think I'll be okay.
Well, let's dive right into it. Embedded world. There you go. See, I'm already getting confused. I don't know how you keep it straight. Mobile World Congress 2025 in Barcelona. Why don't we start with some of the key themes that you saw there? It's always different every year.
It is, and this is kind of an interesting year because we're in between Gs. We're in between 5G and 6G. However, we do have 5G advanced coming down the pipeline, and the starting in about a month, the discussion or the industry discussions around 6G. So the specification definitions are going to be starting here pretty quickly. So and we're seeing right now a lot of the show, and we're not seeing while we're seeing new handsets, we're seeing new technologies and everything come out. A lot of it right now is all focused on the network, and that's appropriate because that's what Mobile World Congress was originally focused on, was the network. So really on improving network efficiency, different types of solutions for network efficiency. There was obviously a focus. Some people still talking about ORAN, although quite honestly, most of the ORAN solutions are kind of a one vendor solution, not an industry wide solution. So it's still kind of hard to really take ORAN seriously at this point. Um, and then also there's a bit of a space race going on. NTN obviously was introduced with release 17, which is non-terrestrial networks or the satellite network, really just for SOS or emergency texting. But now all of the major satellite companies were at the show. They're all talking about their next generation low Earth orbit constellations and how they're going to get into that and trying to move forward with that with each release that comes down the pike for 5G advanced and 6G. So definitely kind of a bit of a space race going on, not just to get to Mars and the moon, but really to create effective satellite communications so we have global communications for the first time.
So we'll double click on NTN in a second, but let's take a quick detour on ORAN. Yeah, I mean, I get that probably in general and in most cases, absolutely. I did that it's kind of single vendor solutions, and there's still some challenges there. I did see an announcement by Qualcomm on the work that they were doing with Docomo. That, at least from the ground here, that seemed like that had multi-vendor, deployment. Are they just starting to kind of scratch the tip? Maybe it's a first, it's a first iteration of a multi-vendor. Maybe it took a little bit of engineering to get that multi-vendor to happen, more than what is suggested for ORAN, or what did you think of that?
Well, we'll see. I think it's a push in the right direction because I mean I think there is benefits to having an open standard, and ORAN is the only open standard solution that's been proposed out there. One of the problems though is that the carriers like to use 21-inch racks, and ORAN specifies at 19 inches, so they lose 2 inches of putting security processors and other stuff in each individual server. So it becomes a bit of a challenge. However, you never know. Rakuten is really still the only big deployment that we've seen for ORAN at this point in time. There's still companies talking about interest in ORAN. We're just not seeing the deployments. So, and the ORAN Alliance still keeps working on standards and specifications. So, it may just be that it was a little ahead of its time, and that we do see a push maybe around the 6G generation. That is a possibility. I think one of the other issues also is, ORAN tries to take kind of standard server architectures and stuff and use them for the telco communications network. Um, One of the issues with that is trying to justify the switch and the cost, especially if you're using expensive solutions like accelerators, like GPUs and stuff like that. NVIDIA has been out there promoting using that extra horsepower for other business models. So I think that's another thing that still has to develop is, what are those other business models that these vendors can effectively utilize? And the hard part is that, let's face it, the carriers just don't move at the speed of light. I mean, first off, traditionally they put a network in place and they just milk it for a decade or more.
Yeah.
Don't touch it, get as much out of it as you possibly can. So to have a network that's going to be software upgradable and possibly changing from year to year, especially as the new technology comes out, that's a little bit more to do. It takes a change in their mindset and in their business model to accommodate that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you mentioned NVIDIA. They're obviously driving one of the driving forces for the AI RAN Alliance, and they have a big thing with AI for RAN, AI on RAN, and AI with RAN. I think I got that right, but the three
Yeah.
AI RAN things. So maybe they'll go hand in hand between getting AI in there and ORAN. So we'll
Well,
have
and also you have to remember that you've also got the AI RAN Alliance or the AI RAN solutions, which are really the trying to take the traditional networks and put AI to make them more intelligent and everything else. And that's also one of the problems is, if you're a carrier out there and you have all these traditional networks in place, it's hard to implement ORAN over that because they don't necessarily coexist very well. So
yeah.
at least not at this point. So it's better for those new networks, those greenfield networks, for the most part, not the brownfield.
Or potentially as they upgrade those networks into 5G Advanced, or say if they're going to do that transition anyway, that might be when they can look at it.
Agreed, but
Yeah.
you got to remember 2G stuck around for decades and decades and decades, and that's kind of the hard part is these networks, even though we're not using them for our cell phone and our latest communications for our handsets and PCs and everything else, they're still being used for a lot of embedded applications, first responder applications. So, I mean, these networks tend to be in place not just for 10 years as we think of G to G,
Multiple
but
years.
actually for decades.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's pivot over to maybe something a little bit more forward looking, which is NTN. You mentioned the space race there. For just to level set for everybody viewing in, non-terrestrial networks, so basically space-based networks that are doing 5G or 6G. But is it at the speeds and performance that we expect terrestrial networks to be, or is it at some kind of lower category of capability, given that it is space-based?
Well, first off, using the global positioning satellite or the global, trying to remember, there's low Earth orbit satellites and there's geosatellites.
Yes,
The
geospatial.
high altitude geosatellites are not going to be good for this.
No,
They're really
a
what we're using
geosynchronous.
today. Yes, geosynchronous. We're using those basically for just that SOS or that emergency signaling. We really need low Earth orbit satellites and kind of a new generation. Even when we think of Starlink, which has been highly successful, their first generation of satellites isn't really that effective for it. They're trying to launch. They're working on the second generations, and other companies are working on low Earth orbit satellites realistically, these different constellations, if you have Geo and Leo, will probably work together. Um, and the best way to think about it is probably like 3G broadband. Yes, will you be able to communicate over? Will you be able to do a video call or a voice call? You should be able to do that as we finally get to, within a couple of years with these new Leo satellites. But it's not going to be 4G, 5G type of speeds. And also, it's going to be an intelligent solution where it's going to be switching between, that's going to be the backup. That's going to be when you're going into a dead spot, like where I live. Uh, when you're going into that dead spot, it's going to switch over to that as kind of the backup. And that in itself also brings up an issue. I mean, obviously, the carriers don't want to launch their own satellites, so they have to work in a partnership
Yeah.
with these satellite providers. So it's going to be, we're still feeling out how everything's going to mesh, but I have high hopes that, by 2030, we're actually going to have global communications.
So you
And
actually
and
bring
and Verizon and T-Mobile and AT&T can actually say they have nationwide coverage, which they don't.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely small hotspots. They're like 1 pixel on the map. They happen to be right where you live, but that's what you get for living up in the mountains. Um, I was actually going to ask about kind of the model for this. I mean, so you've got these satellite companies going up there.
Yeah.
Do they expect to timeshare those satellites across the different operators? And this isn't just a US thing, right? This is a global thing. So there are other global network operators that are going to want time on that. So do they expect uh, because you're not going to put up a satellite just for one operator. So how did based on the
No,
announcements and conversations you
that,
saw,
nobody's really talking about their
model?
relationships and their business models yet, but that makes perfect sense to be able to leverage as many carriers as possible. And quite honestly, the carriers are doing that through carrier aggregation today, so it's not new to them. I would expect that these will just kind of become another backbone network for the carriers.
Cool. Okay, so any other any other announcements that you saw, whether it's from 6G or potentially, down in the stack into the semis or devices?
There are a number of solutions. You mentioned Qualcomm with NTT Docomo, but the other one they did was they announced actually four new modems. One is their X85, which is the next generation of 5G modems, which just continues their march, pushing them higher and higher and higher up the stack in terms of performance and capability. But also three modems for embedded applications, for IoT type applications. So, I mean, we continue to see that technology proliferate out. Um, Prior to the event, MediaTek announced a new flagship processor. The 9400, I believe, is the number. I'd have to check that, but I believe that's the number. And there were plenty of nice, really cool devices at the show. Um, the Honor had some great new cell phones and tablets. They have one that's foldable, that's only folded over. It's 4.5 millimeters thick. It's incredibly thin. Actually, it's funny because the camera actually sticks up farther, kind of like the old Nokia's and stuff used to do.
Yeah.
The Obviously Samsung had already pre-announced their stuff. There was Lenovo had some really nice different styles of PCs and stuff there. So I mean, a lot of cool new gadgets that are still coming out. Some that will have 5G, some that won't have 5G, but they'll all be mobile.
Excuse me.
Um, Intel really impressed me. They actually had one of the systems, and they had a partner there that was actually showing off doing a liquid cooled RAM.
Oh,
Now, this was a pole mounted system that was completely sealed and liquid cooled inside. And I was just blown away with that. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. And they're like, yeah, well, these things sit out there. And the problem is usually they're open to the elements and they get dust and dirt and everything else in there. So we came up with a liquid cool solution for it. It's completely sealed. Very impressive solution. Um, and also the list of partners Intel had was just incredible. Matter of fact, I would say that is the one key takeaway from the show that I think you tend to forget about because we're talking about the radio networks and the carriers and everything else. Also, very visible at the show were Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA. And you realize really quickly that none of these solutions would be available without those three powerhouses, really being the bedrock of the industry, providing the CPUs and the accelerators for the industry. In fact, I would say that it was incredible how many systems have Intel in them. I mean, despite some of maybe the negative press they've received, they are all over that show floor in just about every system. And then when you go by the likes of Supermicro and Gigabyte and stuff like that, you see all three of the systems with Intel CPUs, AMD CPUs and GPUs, and NVIDIA GPUs and NVIDIA CPUs all side by side, and you see just the different types of configurations you can come up with and that they're offering. Um, uh, it really is impressive. So we tend to think of it, like I said, as kind of a wireless show, but you have to remember that without those three companies, there wouldn't be this industry.
So is that for the all for the RAN or stuff for the core as well?
The core as well. So
Okay.
I mean, they were kind of throughout, and that's a key thing. So I mean, all three companies are innovating kind of across the board. So it is impressive to see that. And you could see NVIDIA badges throughout the trade show floor. You could see Intel badges throughout the trade show floor. You saw some AMD badges too, not quite as many, but you saw them there as well. It was an impressive show from that standpoint, just to see all three of those vendors there.
Interesting. Yeah, so another MWC in the books. It's kind of a little bit behind you in the rear view mirror. Hindsight is 2020. What do you think is your key thing? I mean, you brought up NTN, ORAN, semiconductor device manufacturers and their announcements. What would you say is your main takeaway coming out of MWC?
I think the main takeaway is that the industry is not standing still. We are moving ahead with advanced features and improved technology at an extremely rapid pace. And part of this is, quite honestly, driven by AI. It's driven by the same technologies that are being used to run these AI workloads. But now we're seeing AI make it into the systems and not just the core network. They're being made into the RAN, they're made, the base stations are being made into the end devices. Pretty much AI is throughout. And, I mean, that definitely was an underlier of the entire show, but seeing it throughout the network was probably the most impressive thing.
So how is AI being used there primarily for optimizing like the the links, the radio links or the
It
core?
is it is for management, it's for optimization of the antennas, is for pretty much everything you can think of where you might have to program something. We're seeing AI kind of move into those functional spaces to be a critical part and do it much quicker than we could ever do before and
So
more
let's
efficient.
uh let's wrap up with your thoughts real quick. You mentioned 6G.
Perfect. A great example of that is just the fact if you look at like Qualcomm's announcement with the X85. The X85 has an AI modem in it to handle the connection. Their Snapdragon Elites have AI accelerators in them. Their Edge network solutions have accelerators in them. They have AI accelerators for the cloud. So, I mean, it really is kind of a full stack approach.
Yeah, let's not forget to mention they launched a new brand, which in embedded world we'll be talking a lot about more, which is Dragonwing.
Dragonwing, exactly, for all the embedded industrial applications. I was going to save that for the next one, but okay.
Well, we'll use that as a preview, and another preview for that is I really like the colors that they picked for Dragonwing. We'll talk about it at Embedded World. Maybe let's leave it at moving forward to 6G. Um, uh, as each G comes on, whether it's in hindsight or hopefully as the planners are planning it, they have something in mind. So obviously 1G was analog, 2G was our first delve into digital networks. 3G was really about the incoming of data. 4G was really the mobile internet. And then 5G was extending that past, just regular cell phone communications out into industrial and everything else. What do you think the main focus is for 6G as they start planning it?
It's really across the board. It is improving connectivity, improving speeds, and actually, it's the same thing that we've had with each generation, and that is improving network efficiency. Obviously, there's going to be proposals for increasing the spectrum use, increasing the number of frequencies used. I would expect that that's going to be included in the proposals. Obviously, that's one of the biggest challenges to do that on a worldwide basis. But also AI. I mean, in fact, I don't think we should call it 6G. I think we should call it AIG. Or
That,
wait a minute,
that's
that's a company. I don't think we can do that.
yeah.
That might be trademarked.
Well, that kind of makes sense because especially from like 4G and 5G to 6G is 3G was when we first started doing data, but the 4G network was the first networks that were designed from the ground up to be IP and packet based to do
Yeah.
that more efficiently. So maybe 6G is when we're doing AI and 5G now, but maybe in 6G it's designed from the ground up to be able to be AI native, I guess.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, thanks for the wrap up, Jim, and we'll do this again in a week's time to talk about embedded world.
I look forward to it. We already know about some key semiconductor announcements that I'm very, very excited about. So look for more on that in the upcoming days.
Sounds good. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next week.